This is Daily Armenia, ＳիվիլNeթ's daily news digest. Here's what's making headlines in Armenia today. Armenian Parliament Speaker Alen Simonyan says he sees no risk of a coup in Armenia orchestrated by Moscow. Speaking to reporters today in the National Assembly, Simonyan stressed his trust in the Armenian people and dismissed suggestions of external destabilization. Since 2020, changing power in Armenia has been a top priority for various forces from different directions, he said. His comments come ahead of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's planned visit to Moscow on May 9th to attend the 80th anniversary celebrations of the Soviet victory in World War II. When asked, Simonyan rejected the idea that Pashinyan is considered persona non grata in Russia. Simonyan's press briefing followed a meeting with Russian ambassador to Armenia Sergei Kopyrkin on bilateral and interparliamentary ties. Speculation about Russia's growing interest in Armenia's internal affairs is on the rise, following a report published last week by the Russian daily Vedomosti claiming that Sergei Kiriyenko, deputy presidential chief of staff, has been tasked with overseeing Armenia-related policy. The paper cited several Russian officials who described this move as a signal of Moscow's intent to shape the political agenda in Yerevan. Citing sources close to the Kremlin, the paper reported that Moscow is currently focused on shaping the information environment ahead of elections in Armenia next year, promoting Russian interests through indirect influence. Another source noted that with no credible pro-Russian figures in Armenia today, except former presidents Robert Kocharyan and Serzh Sargsyan, Russia faces a vacuum of influence to speak on its behalf. Tensions between Yerevan and Moscow have escalated in recent years, with Armenia freezing its participation in the Russian-led CSTO military alliance in early 2024. But Pashinyan has stated that Armenia is not seeking to harm ties with Russia. Former Armenian President Serzh Sargsyan, who now leads the Republican Party, has emphasized that regime change in Armenia requires not only political will and civil society engagement, but also the active role of law enforcement institutions. Speaking publicly at the informal education platform Armenian University this weekend, Sargsyan posed a pointed question. What is our goal now? To change the government or to work as opposition under the current administration? He did not elaborate on this. Just last week, Sargsyan declared that the time had come to remove Pashinyan, claiming that his Republican Party has a plan to achieve this goal. Sargsyan denied rumors that he and former President Kocharyan have an antagonistic relationship, saying, "My struggle is not about gaining authority in Armenia, but about changing the government." Sargsyan was ousted in 2018 following a massive wave of protests. He differs from Kocharyan in approaches to the current leadership, appearing to support a broader and possibly more immediate form of regime change, compared to Kocharyan's position that Pashinyan should be removed through the electoral process. Both former leaders maintain a presence in Armenia's National Assembly. Kocharyan's Armenia Alliance currently holds 29 seats in the 107-member parliament, while Sargsyan's I Have Honor Alliance holds 7. In a new analysis for SivilNet, military expert Eduard Arakelian of the Regional Center for Democracy and Security pushes back on Kocharyan's recent criticism of Armenia adopting NATO-standard artillery as an unnecessary and expensive change. According to Arakelian, maintaining diverse sources of arms rather than relying on Russia is a strategic imperative, not an option. He argues the switch from Soviet-era 152mm artillery to 155mm is more than technical. It marks a deeper shift in Armenia's defense doctrine, aiming for greater cooperation with global partners. And the price tag? Not so high. Arakelian notes that Indian-made 155mm shells cost as little as $300, far less than Kocharyan's claim of $5,000. Russia, once Armenia's main arms supplier, is now bogged down in Ukraine, struggling with its own shortages and even turning to North Korea for ammunition. Arakelian points out that Russia has failed to deliver on paid weapons contracts and stood by during Azerbaijan's attacks and the ethnic cleansing of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. That inaction forced Armenia to look elsewhere. Today, Armenia is buying 155mm artillery from India and France, joining a global standard used by NATO members, South Korea, Japan, and even Iran. Arakelian says this gives Armenia access to a global market with broader competition, greater technological diversity, and fewer political dependencies. Despite repeated calls for greater openness, Armenia's top officials continue to keep their ceremonial, travel, and accommodation expenses a secret, according to a new report from Radio Azaduchun, RFERL's Armenian service. The Prime Minister, President, and Speaker of Parliament all benefit from a 2016 law that keeps these costs classified, officially for national security reasons. However, the Council of Europe's anti-corruption body, GRECO, has urged Armenia to change this policy, warning that the secrecy undermines trust in public institutions, arguing that exemptions should only apply in truly sensitive cases. Armenia's Justice Ministry says it has held discussions with other government agencies about the matter, but that procurement falls outside of its scope. Requests for information about official travel, residence upkeep, and event budgets are still being denied. GRECO, in a written response, said it is not convinced that such spending should remain hidden from competitive bidding and public scrutiny. The organization added that this kind of secrecy goes against core anti-corruption principles and pledged to assess Armenia's progress in 2026. And as always, please follow CivilNet for the latest news and independent reporting from our contributors on the ground here in Armenia.